Welcome to part 5 of our series. We are getting close to the end now. In this module, we cannot avoid complicating matters a little bit because we are going to link 3 critical concepts. The first is a bolt of realism that water scarcity is an existential threat to the Caribbean islands when viewed separately, but it is not to the Eastern Caribbean as a region. The second is an economic view of water scarcity as quantum theory, in the sense that to understand it, you have to come to grips with some of the complexities that really do matter. And the third is to outline the prospects of a brokered trade model designed specifically to redistribute the water endowment in the Eastern Caribbean islands. Here is a viewer's alert. We will not be presenting to you a simple road map. Rather, we are following the motivation from that famous Spanish poet, Machado, who in 1912 wrote, Caminante, son tus velas el camino y nada más. Caminante, no hay camino, se hace camino al andar. Translated, it is saying, Wanderer, your footprints are the path and nothing else. Wanderer, there is no path. The path is made by walking. So prepare yourself to walk with us as we transform the logic of a water crisis into a sustainable solution. If you were to ask any grandma in rural Caribbean how the street on which she is living got its name, she would most likely tell you that at first it was simply a walkway, created by all of us walking the path. Then it became a trace. Then they called it a lane, before they finally called it a street or a road. That is the reality from which I am coming. So far, we have given you the topographical reasons for the unequal availability of fresh water among the nation-states in the Eastern Caribbean. It is the result of an age-old natural process. It did not start today, and it is not being imposed particularly on Antigua for any sins that may have been committed there. We have also explained that a surplus water source in one political jurisdiction, bordered by other jurisdictions with very low availability of fresh water, is not an unusual occurrence. We have seen it in Turkey, in the Near East, with the Democratic Republic of Congo in Africa, with Indonesia in the Far East, and now with the island of Dominica in the Eastern Caribbean. We have also informed you that even in these circumstances, a trade in freshwater resources does not automatically emerge. For such a trade to be built, it has to be a brokered deal. And according to the Global Water Partnership in 2014, a brokered trade is one in which the needs and economic aspirations of different stakeholders are first recognized and then reconciled within a sustainable fit between the problem and the proposed solution. Let me repeat, to get to a brokered trade, we first have to recognize the needs and economic aspirations of different trade stakeholders. Then we have to reconcile these within a sustainable fit between the problem and the proposed solution. We have also been speaking about our experiences in Antigua, where the solution of a trade in freshwater supplies from the island of Dominica was successfully applied back in 1984, and may still hold some hope for a regional solution to the water security in the Eastern Caribbean in 2025. In a previous section, We had presented to you the guidelines to follow in identifying the major potential actors in such a water crisis solution, deliberately designed to include Dominica's water surplus. There were 5 of them. 1. Mobilize high-level commitments. Number 2. Enhancing mutual accountability. Number 3. Developing capacity. Number 4. Mobilizing public-private finance. And number 5. Attracting new entrants into the water distribution system. So let us take that bold step in creating a pathway and broker a viable trade in freshwater supply between Dominica's water surplus and the water deficits in the rest of the Eastern Caribbean. Our approach here is data-driven and fully informed by the history of our water woes in the Eastern Caribbean. We do not approach this task from a position of being clueless about our history. For the Eastern Caribbean to engage Dominica's surplus in resolving its water crisis, it must forge an alliance among its business partners that has capacity, has a price that is right, and where the numbers do add up. So where do we start? Well, if you know me by now, you would have discerned that I like to tell you clearly the depth at which I am going to swim. At this time, it is not at the level of water resource management. We tried that before between 2015 and 2017 with meetings with the water authorities in both Antigua and Dominica. In both cases, management seemed to have had difficulty in grasping our concepts and our vision, and so essentially we failed. This time, we are rooting ourselves deeply in the economic reality in the Caribbean that epitomizes a multi-stakeholder water governance structure. So, what would a multi-stakeholder water governance structure look like? Well, it will be built on interdependence, because in economic trade, you do not dictate participation. You have to entice willful participation. So, to attract new entrants into the water distribution system, we have to start to attract them as multi-stakeholders in water governance, and not as passive participants to be manipulated by water management. I am targeting water governance because the units we are focusing on are independent organizations that govern themselves. They take decisions in their own self-interest. So what we wish to do is to convince them of the mutual benefits in making these decisions more interdependent. That is what a sustainable fit is all about. Interdependent decisions being made by independent business entities. So what we need at this point is a model that will connect our water deficit islands to the water surplus island of Dominica. Reshaping water security in the Eastern Caribbean on a regional basis calls for us to pursue 3 actionable goals: scalability, economic incentives, and demand reach. Finding a purpose for scalability becomes the first issue, because if we are going to move fresh water through trade arrangements, we have to scale up the production of fresh water in Dominica above its domestic requirements in order to meet the potential demand in the water deficit islands around. We know that the potential exists in Dominica to produce a surplus volume that is at least 28% larger than the collective water deficits in the OECS territories, which are within tradable distance. Remember, the general manager of DOWASCO told us so. We also need scalability at the port in its capacity to receive water imports. In 2024, the Port of St. John's in Antigua pursued an expansion plan that had included the building of a water storage tank to hold 4 million gallons at port. Building a storage capacity at Caribbean ports is nothing new nor strange. They do it all the time to import liquid fuel such as diesel and petroleum. But listen to this. We also need scalability in the organization of households on the demand side. Now, this does not mean organizing protests by persons with buckets at standpipes. It means organizing and establishing a verifiable demand level. We have examined the membership structure of the Antigua Credit Union League, and we are aware that within their 43,000 members lay the potential for a substantial organized demand for water. So immediately we have identified 3 participants from whom we can gain high-level commitments: the Dominican Water Authority, the Port of St. John's in Antigua, and an organization like the Antigua and Barbuda Credit Union League to organize household demand. Now we need to come to grips with the varying economic incentives that will serve as the link in maintaining the willing economic participation in a regional solution to our water crisis. We are talking about building a model with significant incentives for each participant to continue to act accordingly. In fact, it is the incentive structure that will be our talking point when we invite the individual business units to participate in this solution. The incentive for the Dominican Water Authority, DOWASCO, is this. We are providing an opportunity for DOWASCO to extend its sale of freshwater at a price above the price at which it serves its domestic customers. In fact, Dominica can sell its extra supply of water at the highest gazetted price. That would be a clear revenue win for all. A recent study by Alvin Ank has pointed out that globalization and liberalization has brought with it the significant changes in the structure of ownership and capital financing of public utilities in the Eastern Caribbean, especially those operating in sectors like water, which are running at a loss. Whether they know it or not, this is the future financial challenge to the water authorities. It is therefore incumbent on us in our solving of this problem to adjust for this financial future. In addition, persistent fiscal deficits have led us to rethink the role of government in raising funds for capital expansion in these enterprises. There aren't many financing opportunities that a water utility can pursue that would make its transaction eligible for collateralization by a sovereign guarantee from the government. The era of government guaranteeing a utilities loan is over. For the transshipment company willing to convey imported water from Dominica to Antigua, the incentive here is the difference between the landed price for water imports and the trucker's delivery price inland. This is huge. In 2022, we calculated an offer price of US $45 per 1,000 gallons landed at the port of St. John. At that time, the water truckers were charging EC $300 per 1,000 gallons delivered. That is $110 per 1,000 gallons delivered. So, there are 2 groups here that can do a math and see the project of imported water as being very beneficial. The first will be the water truckers, who can figure out that this solution has a potential 55% markup on the distribution side. The second are the households who can see that they can be able, if they can organize, to receive trucked water at way below $110 per thousand gallons. So we are identifying two additional strategic actors in the solution scenario. They are the transshipment company and the water truckers in the on-land distribution. With these folks, incentives will do all of the talking. We can also identify incentives at the port that complement their service to expand to their clientele of cruise ships, yachts, and emergency first responders. We will speak about the emergency first responders later. They are a specific part of the service of the port in Antigua. The message is clear, however. Let the incentives do the negotiating. Reaching a significant demand is the game changer. So, how do we get the numbers to add up? We are back to the old adage of bringing more people to the water supply and simultaneously bringing more water to the people. How do we keep these two together and expand their numbers in a way that helps us to solve the water crisis in the Eastern Caribbean? In Antigua, there are basically two major groups of water users. The first are private users who comprise mainly households. The last household census done in Antigua in 2011 recorded about 36,000 households. For the commercial users in Antigua, we have to look at what is called the Horeca distribution network. This comprises hotels, restaurants, and cafes, and possibly the small brewery. They represent a crucial sector in the food and beverage industry in this tourism economy. Like most Caribbean islands, Antigua does not have a significant manufacturing sector, and its agricultural sector is equally small, utilizing the minimum in irrigation support in production. The catchment group that attracts our attention, however, is the Antigua and Barbuda Cooperative League Limited. They represent 7 credit unions servicing over 43,000 members. It is clear that in this group, we can find households that currently suffer from the lack of water in their domestic environment. Now, let us take the opportunity to explain to you one unique consumption unit that is tied to the port of St. John's in Antigua. This is the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, better known as CDEMA. Here's a little backstory on CDEMA. CDEMA has 4 sub-regional focal points. The eastern sub-region is led from Antigua and Barbuda. Now, the 2017 hurricane season presented the regional, national, and international responders with a unique challenge: how to effectively respond to a multi-island natural disaster in the Eastern Caribbean. A rapid review of regional response funded by Canada, the United Kingdom, and UNICEF immediately highlighted the need for greater support to logistics, communication, and financing, and to strengthen the comprehensive disaster management scheme. The port of St. John was chosen as a strategic staging area for the U.S. Army and the UK Defense Force in the Caribbean to enhance their military readiness and regional security. Now, in military operations, the concept of a strategic staging area plays a critical role. It serves as a temporary location where the troop equipment and supplies are gathered before deployment to their operational environment. One of the most important supplies needed in responding to natural disasters in the Eastern Caribbean is water. So we can expect full support from organizations like SIDEMA in ensuring that each staging point for the Eastern subregion is a critical component of the supply chain for imported water from Dominica. Now, I did promise you that we will have to complicate this discourse a little. We have introduced to you a model for connecting Antigua's water deficit to Dominica's water surplus. It comprises 7 moving parts, namely the Dominica Water Authority, the Transshipment Company, the Port of St. John's, SIDEMA, the Emergency Coordinating Unit, the Antigua Credit Union League, the Antigua Water Truckers, and finally, the Antiguan households who are the ultimate beneficiaries. So let me make sure that you understand what we are creating. As part of the solution to the Caribbean water crisis, we are allowing the units who may have a commercial interest in redistributing water endowment among the islands of the Eastern Caribbean to become part of the solution through economic incentives. Just for one moment in our history, we are allowing Caribbean entrepreneurial interests to mount the drive to increase the water supply in other islands by sharing the water surplus that already exists in the island of Dominica. Why are we doing this? We have 5 reasons for doing this. 1. We recognize the transformative capabilities being signaled in the need to solve this existential problem. 2. These units all have access to existing hardware and infrastructure that can help. 3. We have the twin objective of opening our solution to innovation and commercialization, and 4, at the same time, creating a virtual multi-stakeholder water governance structure in the Eastern Caribbean. We are sure we can reap immense benefits by building an awareness that there is a potential here to create wealth. Believe me when I tell you, creating wealth is more contagious than persistent poverty. So if doubts are starting to drift into your mind that this is looking too complex to become a game changer, let me simply remind you of the words of wisdom coming from none other than Nelson Mandela, the man who defeated South African apartheid when other more powerful nations like the UK and the USA thought that would never change. He continuously told his followers, "It always seems impossible until it is done." Now let me give you the economic theory that sets apart all of what we are saying from the hit-and-run maneuvers that pass for water security in the Caribbean. In classical economic theory, there are 3 factors that will guarantee that a trade pattern is viable, if not sustainable. First, you have to have sufficient scale levels on both sides. Then, the incentives within the system have to be real and obtainable. And finally, the supply should not be externally limited. We can achieve all of those with the individual units we have just described. But there is more to it in our case, because we are dealing across national political boundaries, and we are dealing with independent business units whose participation cannot be prescribed nor dictated to. Our challenge, therefore, is to create a trade model that has among its building blocks the qualities of legitimacy, trust, and the conjecture of giving greater autonomy to diverse interested parties in trade. Spoiler alert, if this doesn't sound like the classical economic theory of trade, you are quite right. Classical economic trade theory is built on the belief that in the market system, willing buyers and willing sellers all have the ability to reduce the risk and increase the certainty of the expected results. Classical economic theory is built on certainty and determinism. Mark those words. If we were to claim this as a projection of our model, we would be setting ourselves up for all sorts of reasons as to why it would not work. You see, in the Caribbean, the level of uncertainty in results is higher than in other societies. That is a fact. And it is mostly so because of our social, political, and financial marginalization in our hemisphere. So where do we go from here? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our new world of a regional quantum ecosystem for trade in freshwater supplies in the Eastern Caribbean. In this model, you are going to hear a mixture of familiar terms like legitimacy and trust, but also new and puzzling terms like entanglement and non-locality. Let me tell you why we have to cast those terms into the foundation of this brokered trade. We use the term legitimacy because we expect to win voluntary compliance from the various participating partners. Similarly, the term trust consists of beliefs or expectations among participants that others will behave in a cooperative way for mutually beneficial outcomes, and not in a non-cooperative way where each unit's action can result in losses on all sides. What about the terms of entanglement and non-locality? Well, there is good reason why we have had to revert to such strange terms that are found in quantum physics. Many scholars have started to explore how quantum concepts could help model complex international financial systems, potentially improving their understanding of interdependencies, risk propagation, and market behavior. We have to use these concepts because the trade network we are building to solve the regional water crisis is a trade network that is associated with unpredictability, nonlinear dynamics, and a sensitive dependence on the initial conditions. That is, a surplus of fresh water in Dominica that can be made available to service the needs of neighboring islands with unsustainable deficits. You see, the classical economic trade model is rooted in rational decision-making, determinism, and certainty in its predictions. If we are to create a broker trade arrangement for one specific purpose, that is to redistribute Dominica's surplus volumes of fresh water, we have to ensure that the agents in this brokered economic trade system are interconnected in more profound ways than previously understood, where the impact of an event in one part of the system can instantaneously influence other distant parts of the network. That is precisely what the quantum concepts of entanglement mean. When two particles, such as a pair of protons and electrons, become entangled, they remain connected even when separated by vast distances. Don't be alarmed with this. Entanglement is a working concept that makes economists and financial CEOs lose sleep, worrying whether a failure in the New York Stock Exchange will somehow result in a ripple effect in the Japanese and European markets within 24 hours. Entanglement is real. So our model is being built on a nascent application of what in other quarters is being called quantum economics. an emerging field that applies some of the principles of quantum mechanics to economic theory and economic modeling. The model seeks to explain our confidence in the economic phenomena of a trade in freshwater supplies through the lens of quantum concepts. Indeed, it is the quantum concepts of entanglement and non-locality that give us the permission to expect a different behavior. Now, do not confuse the term quantum with quantity. When we use the term quantum, we are simply following the incentives that came out of the World Economic Forum in 2024, which described the phenomenon at the performance and operational level, where energy, which in our case is motivation, matter, which is the substance being traded, and information all combine to produce economic behaviors that differ from what classical economics tells us to expect. Let me explain how that works. From a Caribbean perspective, quantum economics conditions our mind to deal with the probability of a different behavior resulting from our own versions of interdependence, entanglement, and protecting against intrinsic uncertainty. In the Caribbean, if we are to be honest, we are forced to build our solutions around uncertainty and probabilities. There is probably more uncertainty in getting results from business actions in the Caribbean than in most other countries. At least, many in the business community believe so. In Caribbean business, unless you are operating on license from some overseas supply chain, you have got to be innovative and entrepreneurial to overcome the odds and achieve sound results. So it will take some patience and a lot of curiosity for me to convince you that giving greater autonomy to diverse interested parties, managing a complex set of trade arrangements across different islands in the Eastern Caribbean with one strategic objective, can improve the outcomes when done at a regional level and not cause it to fall into the chaos we witness at the local level. I agree that there is a lot to unpack here, so let us just do that. In our terms, it means that the management in the Wasco in Dominica, in planning their expansion, now has to take on board the potential of servicing an operational demand arising from the Credit Union League and the Port Authority in Antigua. But get this, we are not going to make emotional appeals to higher morals or West Indian patriotism to achieve these goals. We are looking to the economics to do the job. This is why our model says that it is opening the solution to innovation and commercialization. Remember that the participating units will all have been convinced that the mutual benefits from a regional solution to the Caribbean water crisis are strong enough to be worth their continued individual voluntary pursuit. Just so that you do not miss, the image I am portraying is this. Unlike in other trade models, no unit will be able to assume sole responsibility for its benefits from this solution. The port knows that its benefits are tied up with the credit union, creating such a large demand as to attract the willing participation of those who have surplus water in Dominica. The Wasco knows that its benefits are due to the shipping unit continuing to respond to the express demand for fresh water coming out of Antigua. Every participating unit in this trade knows that its benefit structure is dependent on the continued participation of the others. Let me also reorient your thinking to something else that is new. When we say our model is a regional model in the quantum sense, you may think that it is simply because our base of operation is the Eastern Caribbean as a region. It is not simply a new design for Caribbean member states to do more cooperating with each other. That is for CARICOM and OECS. In our broker trade arrangement, it is the participants and or decision makers within the member states whom we expect to continue to act on the expectation that the benefits they will obtain from a coordinated trade activity across the different island politics within the region will be substantial. But here is where you will learn a new difference. When the Caribbean says regional in perspective, they don't get any further than a simple coordination of different island projects to get them all to a state of separate but equal. That's how the Global Water Partnership interprets Caribbean regionalism on water issues. In our system, the term regional is used deliberately to violate the dominance of locality in water decisions. In quantum physics, the principle of locality states that an object is influenced directly only by its immediate surroundings. The idea that an economic entity like the Water Authority of Dominica can only be influenced by its immediate surroundings, its local resource base, its customer base, and its current level of technology, that idea is no longer valid in our model. Observe very carefully what we are doing here. In our perspective of becoming regional, we are elevating the concept of remote causality in action. So even though the incentives are specific to the individual units, the reason why they are real is because they are part of a larger program of redistributing water availability among the islands. The entire package of this trade is the reason for the units in this trade. So just as quantum physics grew out of the studies of energy transactions between particles, quantum economics starts by examining the connecting properties of different economic units, collectively pursuing financial goals, but connected in the form of entanglement to one strategic goal: making Dominica's water surplus available to other islands. Keep in mind this picture of the water surplus island surrounded by a group of water-starved neighbors. Remember, we informed you that in these situations, as exhibited in the slide you are viewing, trade of a surplus with others in deficit does not automatically occur. It has to be a brokered trade. Trade as an ecosystem is a symbolic representation. The system part of it is that you have to presuppose that the economic units will act as a unit of entangled parts of an inseparable whole, regardless of distance. In a classical worldview, the challenge in trade usually arises when individual units act as if they are independently free and pretend to view their interactions as local. In the quantum trade view, it is the shared information, which we call annexed intelligence, about each participating component that links them in a viable trade and makes the whole greater than the sum total of its parts. Now let us see how the numbers add up. We have been conditioned by classical economics to associate a surplus with trade. So for decades, young entrepreneurs in Dominica have been dreaming of selling some of their surplus water in the water deficit markets such as in Antigua, St. Kitts, and Anguilla. but it is history that has to teach us that in respect to trade in fresh water, the initiative always originates from the demand side. It is Israel that has initiated the several attempts to buy water from Turkey. Even in our own history, it was a delegation from Antigua who first approached Dominica in 1984, purchase fresh water, and avoid a national catastrophe. So if our solution is to redistribute the surplus endowment of water in Dominica, it has to be first rooted in an organized push coming from the demand side. So let us begin by figuring out how we can broker such a trade from the demand side. We start first by looking at the Credit Union League in Antigua, which has a membership of 43,000 members. Were we to encourage the Credit Union League to offer its membership an assurance scheme guaranteeing each member access to 400 gallons per week during a period of water emergency at a price below the current water truckers' delivery charge, with less than half of its members participating in such a scheme, let us say 15,000 households participating in this scheme, that would result in an organized demand of 24 million gallons per month. Then the Port of Antigua has a storage capacity for 4 million gallons. If in servicing its clients, that is cruise ships, cargo vessels, and luxury yachts, the port estimates a turnover of 2 times its capacity per month. This can produce upwards of 8 million gallons per month. SEDEMA, that organization that organizes a response to natural disasters in the Eastern Caribbean, can be expected to show an interest by offering to take a lien on 2 million gallons reserved per month. The APUA may certainly wish to get into the action, as they may see the opportunity to boost their supply in the area around the port, with an initial and cautious demand of, let's say, 8 million gallons per month. What we would have done immediately is to reach in this trade model a water import level of 42 million gallons per month into Antigua. That would be a significant boost to the water truckers to increase their activity in the delivery system, the transshipment company in achieving a viable volume per trip of 1.2 million gallons. It can also serve as the basis for a shipping company to invest in a convoy of water barges to expand the supply chain, and the WASCO can keep its eyes on its ability to finance its capital infrastructure expansion budget. This is a solution that spurns economic activity all around. All of these things we have built by just making the path by walking. Singapore has successfully demonstrated to us how to use water importation to satisfy the immediate needs of the people. It is now up to us to use this space and this time to plan a long-term strategy to achieve true water security in the Caribbean Eastern region. If you have enjoyed this section, please leave a like, comment, and share with all your friends. Thank you.